Have you ever noticed that a lot of people spend years working hard? Their income keeps growing. They get raises. They even invest consistently. Yet somehow, they still feel like they're stuck in the exact same place. Every 2 weeks, another paycheck lands in their bank account. The mortgage or rent gets paid. The credit card bills come due. A portion goes into their 401k, maybe a Roth IRA or a brokerage account. And then the whole cycle starts all over again for millions of Americans. That's exactly what financial life feels like running on a treadmill. You're putting in the effort every single day, but it never feels like you're actually getting ahead. Then one day, you open your high-yield savings account, you check your investment portfolio, your retirement accounts, your brokerage account. For the very first time, you add everything together, and your total net worth officially crosses $100,000. Here's the surprising part. From the outside, nothing about your life looks different. You still have the same job, you still drive the same car, you still live in the same home. Your daily routine hasn't changed, but something inside you has. A number that might not seem life-changing to everyone else quietly becomes one of the biggest turning points in your entire financial journey. I've spent years studying wealth building, investment psychology, and the financial habits that separate people who build lasting wealth from those who never seem to get ahead. And one pattern keeps showing up again and again. Building your first $100,000 and building the next 100,000 are two completely different games. It's not just about the money. It's about your mindset. It's about momentum. It's about confidence. Because for the first time, your money begins working just as hard as you do. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. Why do so many successful investors, entrepreneurs, and financial experts say that your first $100,000 is the hardest milestone you'll ever reach? Why does it take some people 8, even 10 years just to reach their first $100,000? But getting from 100,000 to 200,000 often happens much faster. And more importantly, if you're currently at 10,000, 25,000, 50,000, or even $75,000, what should you understand? So this milestone becomes much more than just another number and becomes the true beginning of your wealth building journey. Because maybe the most exciting part of building wealth isn't becoming a millionaire. Maybe it's the exact moment when your financial snowball finally starts rolling. So why is the first $100,000 so difficult? Imagine you're pushing a massive boulder uphill. At the beginning, every bit of the weight is on you. Every single inch feels difficult. You push, the boulder moves forward a little, then it stops. So you have to push again. Building your first $100,000 feels exactly like that. Why? Because in the beginning, your wealth building engine is still very small. Let's say you're investing $1,000 every month. By the end of the year, you've invested $12,000. Now imagine your investments earn an average annual return of around 10%. That's only about $1,200 in investment growth. Notice something interesting. You contributed $12,000, while the market only added around $1,200. At this stage, most of your wealth is still coming from your income. Your investments are simply a small bonus. The engine is still small. Now look at a different situation. Someone already has $100,000 invested. The market delivers another 10% return. That's about $10,000 in just 1 year. Now, the market itself generated almost as much money as the first investor contributed over the entire year. That's where the magic begins. And that's exactly why building your first $100,000 is emotionally the hardest part. Progress feels painfully slow. You open your investment account, and it feels like nothing much has changed. You check your portfolio, but there's very little excitement. You look at your bank account, and it still feels like a long road ahead. But in reality, you're laying the foundation. And foundations always look far less exciting than the building itself. Before any skyscraper rises into the skyline, months are spent digging into the ground. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But underneath, the most important work is already in progress. Building wealth works exactly the same way. Your first $100,000 doesn't just change your bank balance. It begins changing who you believe you are. Here's something fascinating. When people get close to their first $100,000, it isn't only their net worth that changes. Their identity starts changing too. At first, they see themselves as someone who earns a paycheck. Now they begin thinking like an investor. And that shift changes everything. Imagine two people, both earn the exact same salary. The first person thinks like an employee. The second thinks like a wealth builder. Same income, completely different behavior. When a bonus arrives, the first person thinks about taking a vacation. The second starts thinking about asset allocation. When the market drops, the first person feels fear. The second starts looking for opportunity. And this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens the first time you realize your investments have finally become meaningful. That's the moment. You quietly start believing, maybe I really can build wealth. And that confidence may be one of the most undervalued assets you'll ever own. Because building wealth is far less about numbers and far more about behavior. Compounding is finally becoming visible. Everyone has heard about compounding, but here's the truth. Most people give up on it long before it ever has the chance to change their lives. During the first few years, and compounding feels incredibly boring. So boring that many investors quit too soon. Let's say you've invested $100,000. Your portfolio earns an average annual return of 10%. 1 year later, you've earned about $10,000. It's not life-changing. It's not exciting. It's not even the kind of return people brag about online. But if that same process continues year after year, everything begins to change. At $100,000, a 10% return generates $10,000. At 200,000, it becomes 20,000. At 500,000, it becomes 50,000. At $1 million, that same 10% return generates $100,000. See what's happening? The percentage never changed. Your experience did. Compounding is a lot like planting a seed. Nobody is impressed by a seed. But years later, that same seed grows into a massive tree. And suddenly everyone says, wow, look how incredible that tree is. Very few people remember that for years, almost nothing seemed to happen. That's exactly why your first $100,000 is really a reward for patience. It's proof that you stayed in the game long enough for compounding to finally take over. Because sometimes simply surviving is success itself. But surviving doesn't mean you've already won. Because right after many people finally reach their first $100,000, a completely different enemy quietly appears. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't feel dangerous. In fact, it often feels like success. It's called lifestyle inflation. This is where many wealth builders accidentally begin slowing themselves down. Their income goes up, so they upgrade their lifestyle. A better apartment, a newer car, a more expensive vacation, a nicer phone, more dining out, more subscriptions. Little by little, their spending rises just as fast as their paycheck. Here's the problem. Their investment rate never grows. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with water while someone keeps making the hole at the bottom bigger and bigger. No matter how hard you pour, the bucket fills far more slowly than it should. That's exactly what lifestyle inflation does. I've seen people earning $200,000 a year with surprisingly little wealth, and I've seen others making half that income quietly build remarkable portfolios. The difference wasn't income, it was behavior. Your first $100,000 teaches you something most people never truly understand. Real wealth is usually invisible. It lives inside investment accounts, retirement portfolios, index funds, brokerage statements, assets that keep working long after you stop, not in the luxury car, sitting in the driveway, not in designer labels, not in expensive watches. Because real wealth isn't what people see, it's what quietly creates freedom. One of the most fascinating things about success is momentum. Think about going to the gym. During the first few months, it feels incredibly frustrating. You show up, you put in the work, you sweat, you stay disciplined. But when you look in the mirror, almost nothing seems different. It's easy to believe your effort isn't paying off. That's exactly why so many people quit. Not because the system failed, but because they stopped too early. Money works the exact same way. Your first $100,000 creates financial momentum. For the first time, you begin noticing progress that once felt invisible. A 1% market move actually means something. Your annual returns start becoming noticeable. Your portfolio begins growing fast enough that you can finally see the difference. And something even more important happens. Your investing habits start rewarding you. Saving no longer feels like giving something up. Investing no longer feels like waiting forever, because now the results are finally starting to catch up with your patience. And once good financial behavior starts producing visible rewards, staying consistent becomes dramatically easier. That's the moment when wealth building stops feeling like hard work and starts feeling like momentum. And once momentum starts working for you, everything begins to change because now you're no longer relying only on your paycheck. Your investments are beginning to create income of their own. That's the moment. When wealth quietly becomes self-sustaining, every dividend, every market gain, every dollar earns another dollar. Then that dollar starts earning another one. Eventually, your portfolio begins contributing more to your financial future than your monthly savings ever could. That's when the relationship changes. You stop asking, how much can I save this month? And you begin asking, how can I make my money work harder? That single question separates people who stay trapped in the paycheck cycle from those who gradually build financial independence, because wealthy people don't just buy assets, they build systems. Systems that continue producing wealth, whether they're working, sleeping, or spending time with their family. That's why real wealth isn't measured by how much you earn. It's measured by how many financial engines are working for you every single day. And once you understand that, you'll never look at money the same way again, because the ultimate goal was never to work for money forever. The goal was always to reach the point where money finally starts working for you. And that's when you realize something. Most people spend their entire lives misunderstanding. The greatest benefit of wealth isn't luxury. It isn't status. It isn't impressing strangers. It's freedom. The freedom to say no. The freedom to leave a job that no longer makes you happy. The freedom to spend time with the people you love. The freedom to handle an emergency without fear. The freedom to make decisions because you want to, not because your bills force you to. That's why real wealth almost never announces itself. It doesn't need to, because confidence doesn't need attention. Security doesn't need applause, and freedom doesn't need permission. Ironically, the people who look the richest often have the least financial freedom, while the people quietly building assets are usually creating the life everyone else thinks they're already living. That's why your first $100,000 was never really about reaching a number. It was about becoming a different person, someone who understands that wealth is built quietly, patiently, consistently, one decision at a time. So why do so many successful investors, entrepreneurs, and financial experts keep saying that your first $100,000 is the hardest milestone you'll ever reach? Now you know. Because the hardest part was the number itself. It was becoming the kind of person who could build it. Someone who keeps investing, even when progress feels invisible. Someone who stays patient while everyone else is chasing shortcuts. Someone who understands that real wealth is built quietly, long before anyone else notices. Your first $100,000 doesn't make you wealthy overnight, but it proves something far more valuable. It proves that you've learned how wealth actually works. And once you've learned that, the second 100,000 becomes easier. Then the third, then the fourth. Not because investing changed, but because you changed. Because now you're no longer working only for money. Your money has finally started working for you. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Financial freedom isn't built in one giant moment. It's built one smart decision, one investment, one paycheck, 1 month, 1 year at a time. So if you're still working toward your first $100,000, don't get discouraged, because every dollar, every investment, every sacrifice is building something far bigger than a portfolio. You're building a mindset that can create wealth for the rest of your life. And one day, you'll look back at the moment you crossed your first $100,000 and realize it was never the finish line. It was the beginning. And maybe years from now, you'll remember this exact moment, not because you became rich overnight, but because you finally understood what wealth really is. Remember how this story began. We talked about people working harder every year, getting raises, saving more, investing consistently, yet somehow still feeling stuck. Now you understand why. The goal was never to chase a bigger paycheck. The goal was always to build an engine powerful enough to eventually carry you without pushing every single day. Because one day you'll open your portfolio, you'll look at the numbers and you'll smile. Not because you finally became a millionaire, but because you'll remember the day you crossed your first $100,000. The day everything quietly changed. Not your car, not your house, not your lifestyle. You. Because that's the day you stopped thinking like someone who earns money and started thinking like someone who builds wealth. And once that happens, everything else becomes just a matter of time. The first $100,000 was never the destination. It was the moment. Your future finally changed direction.